you hear me all right? Good afternoon. Thank you for hosting. I'm Anthony Stevens. Just get that out of the way. I look after the innovation team at Northern Trust. So I'm going to explain what Northern Trust is first, because most people probably haven't heard of us. We are a bank, global custody bank. We are based in Chicago. We've got 24,000 employees around the world. We've got three parts of our business, pretty much equal in each of the parts. We are a private client, high net worth individual. So in the US, we look after 75 of the top 100 US families in a sort of family office structure where we can do everything from, I'd say, a sort of white glove service, looking after everything that they need, all the way through to looking after family assets. We've got an asset management business. I think we're the fourth largest asset manager in the world. Most people haven't heard of us because we're fairly, I'm going to say conservative. I was going to say boring, but we're pretty conservative, low key, exactly. Most of the assets we look after are in very short duration, very low risk. So most of it is around having cash available for people when they want to invest, which is what the third part of our business is, which is, well, I'd say, asset servicing. This is why it's important that we're talking about today, is we look after things and we keep them safe. We've been going for 130 years, and in the first year we were in operation, we looked after people's stuff. The rich people in Chicago, when it got cold in the winter, they moved to the coast, and they put all of their chattels into a big safe, which is still there in Chicago, and we looked after their stuff, gold bars, beds, picture frames, you name it. That's what we started doing. There's three custody banks left in the US, State Street, Bank of New York, and ourselves. And our entire reason for existing is to make sure that the assets that our clients give to us are kept safe. And we have a fiducial responsibility that if we were to lose them for any reason, we give them their money back. So we have a balance sheet that supports that. We look after $17 trillion of assets, so a relatively large number. I don't see any of that. It's not all in our safe. It's mainly in digital form these days. My job is I look after the innovation group. So I build things with new technologies that our clients may want in the next 5 or 10 years. We started to build a carbon credit platform out about 3 years ago. We actually had the product built probably 2 years ago, but it took another 2 years to get the legal work through. I'm a US entity and I have 3 regulators that I have to report to in the US alone, which is the Fed. There are many Feds, but I'm looked after by 2 Feds, both Washington and Chicago. I'm looked after by the CFTC, who looks after commodities, which is what a carbon credit is in the US. And I'm looked after by the SEC to make sure that if I put anything into a sort of token or a security, that I've got those guys to look after me as well, which is lovely. Three regulators. It's like having, I'm going to say it's like having 3 wives. I love my wife. I love the regulators. They do a very good job. So what do we do? And why is this important to you guys in Brazil? We started off our journey, I'm going to call it our digital innovation journey, back in 2015 when we set the team up and I joined the group and we started looking at blockchain. Lots of people heard about blockchain, mainly heard about it because they've probably heard of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum. We were interested in the underlying technology rather than the cryptocurrencies and how those underlying technologies could provide guidance, information, transparency, data, all those sort of good things that blockchain could do, because it's an immutable record. Once you put it on there, you can't hide it. It's there. People can see it if you make it public to them. So we started building an application, which is what we still run on today. It's an application called Matrix Zenith. It does a couple of things. It links the existing digital market to our internal traditional market. So if one of my clients buys a cryptocurrency, we can link it back into their main assets. So they can see all of their assets together, even though I don't provide custody to it directly. Or we build things where we run what I would say a real asset. So we could say carbon credit is a real asset. It's a thing that can be owned. And though we therefore can tokenize it or digitalize it, and we can manage its life cycle through from birth to death. So creation of the emission claim all the way through to it being consumed. So it acts very much like any other financial asset as long as you can get it into the right structure. We do run a bond fractionalization product out in Singapore. We've got a stable coin product in the US. We manage digital bonds. So there's a whole, I'm going to say, slew of services that we've built out within this digital space. When I started this journey, I was very lucky. I met Kieran, who you're going to meet later from Go Balance. He sort of got me all excited about how we could use technology to make this world more transparent and easier for people to understand, and they could see exactly what they were buying. You're going to hear from Kieran, so I'm not going to take up too much of what Kieran does. But what Kieran and I did together is we looked at his asset. So the thing that Kieran does, the thing that all project developers do, is they capture carbon dioxide or an equivalent in some form, or they avoid it. But in Kieran's case, he captures it in trees, in the ground, in the land. That is work that has been done. Without Kieran's project, that work wouldn't have been done. So that is all additional. That work equivalates into an emission claim. So all of the thing that Kieran's trying to do is trying to basically generate emission claims. That is an intangible asset to most people. So if I'm sat in London, I can't go and touch the carbon credit or the carbon that Kieran's captured in his tree. I'd have to go to the Amazon rainforest and have to figure out which one in Amazon or in Borba where my carbon is located. It doesn't work that way, nor should it work that way. So what we're trying to do, or what we have done, is we've taken the work that Kieran's done, where he's been issued with an emission claim, and we've embedded that emission claim directly into an asset on a register. So in the voluntary market, and this, 15, 20 years the voluntary market's been going, the reason why the voluntary market started was absolutely right. It was to produce a system that would allow people to invest voluntarily into capturing carbon dioxide. Over the years, what's happened within that market is it's sort of been really difficult to figure out where your asset is. And if you want a market to scale like other financial markets, you sort of need all assets to either look the same, act the same, or be very secure in the fact that you've bought it. And it's really difficult when you've captured some CO2 in a tree to then sell that right to somebody else and for them to consume it. And this is where technology can help, and hopefully Kieran will talk about some of the things he's doing within Borba, which is providing that transparency. But the general gist of it is you get given, as a project developer, an emission claim. You then have to sell that emission claim to somebody that wants to buy it. They have to consume that emission claim or retire that carbon credit, and they have to then use that against, or they can use that against their carbon footprints. Or they could sell it, or they could hold it, or actually what you want them to be able to do is, if they don't want to sell them, you want them to use it as collateral in a loan, and you want to receive funding because the pricing might not be right, or you want them to be able to create credits in advance to raise funds, to then have those funds invested into the project, which over time will create emission claims or carbon credits. So we came up with a structure, and this is why it took 2 and a bit years, with 3 different regulators, that allows us to take the emission claim that is issued via the VVB, the verification firm, to the project. We embed that into a credit on our system. We're a custody bank. We look after people's assets. This is just another asset of somebody that they own. Kieran owns it. It is a commodity underneath CFTC rules. So this is where it gets complicated throughout the world. Carbon is seen as different things in different parts of the world, which also makes it different to decide how to buy and sell it or hold it. So in the UK, it's a non-regulated asset. So the regulators don't have a decision point on it. As a non-regulated asset, you cannot hold it in a custody account. You're not allowed. In Australia, it is a personal property right. It is clearly defined as such in Australia. In most of the parts of the world, there's very little regulation about what they are. In the US, very recently, like last week, the CFTC made it very clear that a carbon credit, both compliance and voluntary, and UNFCCC, so the ITMOs that will be issued or are issued, are all commodities underneath CFTC rules. It's Really clear. They operate a derivatives market, and therefore they have to operate the underlying asset. Same thing with gold, same thing with wheat bushels, the same structure. So they made that very clear last week. So we now know that in the US, a carbon credit of any type is a commodity. A Q45 tax credit, a CEF 1 or 3 sustainable aviation fuel credit are all the same underneath US rules. So now we have clarity in the US that all property rights to intangible, non-financial commodities are commodities under US rules. That means we can now hold them as financial assets in accounts, and it means we can transact them directly from one account to another on the register. We are so far the only firm that's done this. So if you were to buy a credit on the existing market from one of the existing projects on another register, so let's not pick on anyone, but if we were saying the big four, your Veras, your Gold Standards, your ACRs, they are, in effect, they're just recording an ownership. They are not transacting the emission claim. So if you are a project developer and you have got one of those methodologies, you sign a paper agreement between your buyer that says, I'm going to buy your emission claim from you. And then the owner of that emission claim sends a message to the registry saying, please move the registry ownership from me to whoever the buyer was. So the two things are disconnected. The cash flow is also disconnected. So there's three different things going on. So at that point, you've got some confusion. First of all, you're handing over some credits to somebody and not generally getting paid, which is not the way normally you want to do things. You want to get paid when you hand over your asset. And you've also got no understanding whether that legal agreement was written correctly and whether the credits were handed over correctly through that agreement. But on the register, you may show as owner. And the register doesn't know whether you wrote that legal agreement correctly either. So we saw this as a problem. And so we created a system that allows us to put all those things into one place. So what we do is we ensure that the project developers own their emission claims. So we took 200 projects that were on the main registers, and over 100 of them did not own their own emission claims. Yet they were selling them to buyers. And it wasn't fraud in most cases, it was naivety, because they never looked at this before. So if you are a landowner and it's your land in Brazil that you are running the project on, the landowner has to provide a clear understanding that they have given the project developer all rights to the emission claims. And it has to be clearly written in law, in a legal document that they do. Anyone that does work within that project has to clearly write that they do not own the emission claims and that the project developer does. If not, you end up with a point where somebody could come and sue you to say, I never gave you the rights to those emissions, and therefore they're not yours. So you've got to make sure that the legal constructs are correct. And of the 200 projects we first looked at, 100 didn't have those in place. Now, the likelihood of them getting sued is probably slim, but as a custody bank, I cannot put an asset on my platform that I don't know who it belongs to, because I have taken the physical financial responsibility to ensure that asset is owned by that person before they're allowed to sell it. So we're also about the only firm in the market that actually takes financial responsibility for the asset on platform. So if it turned out that Kieran didn't own his credits and he was sued, it is actually my responsibility because I've allowed them to be transacted, and my pockets at the bank are deeper than Go Balance's, even though Kieran did buy me coffee earlier. Thank you, Kieran. But I'm the one that's going to get sued, right? So we have to be very clear of what we are doing. We're ensuring that the property right is the project developers. We're embedding it onto a digital platform, and we're physically delivering that to the buyer for cash at the same time. And the embedded contract that moves that property right is shifted all at the same time. So we've got three things going on that's providing guidance and transparency to the owners that they're getting paid for the money for the work that they've done. It's a really simple cycle. We look after 20 project developers to date. They are spread across the Amazona. We've got some well capping projects where we're looking at methane avoidance in the US. really obvious. Stop the methane leaking before you try and capture CO2 from the atmosphere. There's some real quick wins that we're helping support. We're looking after some carbon capture and storage solutions in Scotland, where we're capturing real-time data. So the other thing that we do is we don't just check that the ownership is there, we actually capture carbon tons in real time. So with the project we're working with in Scotland, they're capturing CO2 off the top of a fermenting vessel, which then goes across and gets stored underground. We take the IoT data in real time, we capture it, so I can tell you when every ton of CO2 was captured, moved, and stored and verified. And that means that as a buyer of the carbon credits that are on our platform, you're not just buying a ton of emission claim, you're buying a ton of emission claim plus all of the history of that individual ton of carbon dioxide. That's what we do. Perfect timing.
It's pretty amazing, and thank you for the very detailed explanation of how it works, which I'm sure will elicit quite a few questions, not the least for me. But thank you for that, Anthony.
Okay.
I'm going to hold on for questions for a while, and please, if Tiago could make his presentation, we can then get Anthony and Tiago answering to the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniella. Can you hear me? Yes. I wonder, Anthony, how much of the value is on the carbon credit per se and the history of it, because I guess history is really important. So it'll be interesting to discuss. But well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Daniella. I guess it come in a right timing to be discussing those subjects in front of the COP that will be happening in Brazil and amidst all the things that are happening in the world right now. And we saw with Malek all the global landscape. Now we talked about custody and history, but I guess my value here to this panel and from Banco do Brasil in this panel is to see how this can get to the countryside Brazil, to the Amazon forest, to the countryside Rio Grande do Sul, and so on and so forth. So I will present to you a little bit of Banco do Brasil initiatives. I'm the head of BB Securities, Banco do Brasil capital arm here in London, but I'm within the bank for the past 17 years, so I've been around enough to understand and to explain a little bit of the context of what the bank has been doing on that area. So basically start on the carbon markets and talking a little bit about Banco do Brasil. We are a number of branches, the biggest bank of the Brazilian countryside with more than 4,500 points of contact with clients along all the Brazil territory. We also own the biggest asset manager in the Brazilian industry, the second largest insurance company, and we have all other subsidiaries. So I guess when we talk about Brazil, I guess our role as a bank, as a conglomerate, is to be involved in all the discussions that takes and that brings the name of our country. Talking specifically about the voluntary carbon market, I guess, and we saw from Malek's presentation, the biggest part of the growth is on the voluntary markets. I guess the challenge here is how to make this happen and how us as an entity, as a bank, can make buyers and sellers, developers, producers, companies to grow their participation in this market. We estimate a potential of $50 billion until 2030 on the voluntary carbon markets. And right now we are at 800, 900 million so far. So there's a lot to work on, a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. And why Brazil? We estimate that almost 55, 56% of Brazilian territory is covered by preserved native forests. So there is a lot of things that needs to be done to keep as it is, but there's a lot of monetization that can come from this activity as well. So I guess we have a lot of work to do in that regards. We also have the net zero commitments, and I guess the global landscape have been changing here and there, but we have no question that the way to go is to reduce emissions and to zero emissions as soon as possible. From Malek, 3 scenarios, I'm pretty sure that the bottom one is the one that's going to be happening, but how can we prevent that to reach a point where we cannot operate no more, or can we have a no-go status? So I guess those initiatives come in line of trying to help and to develop all those initiatives and commitments that are already made. We have now, the last number that I have from our ESG area is 115 Brazilian companies that had the commitment to the net zero. So a little bit of history here. We saw the regulated market growing from 2005, 8 billion to right now, representing a little bit more than $100 billion. And the voluntary market growing, but still at 800 million figure right now. So I'm gonna bring to you today a little bit of Banco do Brasil developments on the voluntary market. We try to use that and passing along a little bit of our philosophy on that. We use pretty much an innovative sandbox approach where we test several lines of ideas, and the ones that we think it will happen and gain market fit with our consumers, we escalate and bring this over throughout the bank. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that. The project development. We have right now 322 billion in loans to companies on Brazil, more than 5,000 companies. So we go to those companies and given every region and every geography that we operate, we saw those business cases that might fit for some voluntary carbon markets practice, either to the way of monetizing that or to fit the company strategy where they want to position themselves in terms of initiatives and ESG related projects. One of those cases was the Grupo Lida, when we did a soil carbon project on carbon storage, where we did things from the assessment, the funding, the development, and also we find a buyer for the carbon credits generated from those projects. So we can go from the start to the finish, acting as a bank, providing capital, but also acting as an advisory to those companies on those perspectives. I guess one point that is very important to highlight here is we've been facing, every single project is different. So this needs to be made on a really ad hoc base case. So the relationship manager needs to understand the potential, then needs to bring to the ESG team to evaluate what can be done and how we're gonna be doing that. Then we need to go to the finance team to see if we need to deploy capital or we can find someone to deploy capital. Then we need the execution, which takes time, and we never know what's going to be possible or not until you start this to get done. And in the end, you can have the carbon credits and sell. And then we get to the custody and all the history, which is very, very important. So I guess my first point here is how difficult and how complex is. We're talking about really complex system from the start to the finish. And this is something that we, for the past 7-6 years that we've been working on that regards, we could find that it's more difficult than we start realizing. But as much as you do, you can learn more. And now I do think we position ourselves in a more experienced way to continue doing that. Another project that I want to mention is the BNDU Verde, where we had some real estate that we receive carbon credits in order to sell those real estates that was on the bank inventory. And this is one of the projects that we faced. We start small and we grew up to a number of 58 properties sold and more than 80,000 carbon credits in payment. And then now we are reevaluating to see the ways that we can scale this to an even bigger proportion and to find out even bigger markets to achieve. So you can see that, you know, it's several different initiatives. So my first message when I see that is probably everyone here in this room have heard about Banco do Brasil if you are in Brazil or operating in Brazilian market. And if you have a use case, bring to us because we are always open to evaluate and test sandboxes, test cases before escalate that. So if you think you might be interested in something of that, please reach out to us because we are operating at full scale on that. And one of the things that are growing, Daniella, and I guess it's very important to mention here, is our part of advisory and consulting services. Because as long as we go doing those type of projects and we learn from the problems, mistakes, or even challenges, we kept growing our storage of knowledge and our storage of solutions that we might have in terms of problems we face. And that, I guess, our clients expect from us, and that's what we gain from scale. And then we are growing the advisory and consulting services for more than 200 people in Brazil, specialized in those type of projects that can fulfill every demand that can come on our way. Talking a little bit about numbers, we have the last figure on the first half of 2025, 850,000 hectares preserved or reforested from our projects. 27 projects, roughly per year, 3.1, 3.2 million carbon credits generated per year in our operations. And we vary, I mentioned 2 projects here, but we have much more projects much more projects that we are doing that can generate those carbon credits. And one thing I guess it's important to highlight here is this is not only from a bank perspective or shareholder perspective, but this is something that we notice from our clients. The world is changing, but the clients are demanding that the world change. They come to us and ask us for our initiatives on the area, what we are doing to help. And this is something that we think that is a long-term commitment, the institution, in response to the clients that we have, and they are asking for that. The growth that we have, and it seems to be the constant right now, it's double digits between 12 to 15%. That's what we forecast until 2030 in our projects in voluntary markets. Here a little bit of the financials. We talk about roughly 15,000 hectares in terms of project that we will generate roughly $750,000, 3.7 million reais roughly. And our main focus is on the REDD+ projects, is on the areas under pressure from deforestation. So all the borderline of the Amazon regions that are on borderline for deforestation. In terms of advisory, I mentioned briefly, but this focus basically on risk management, of course, company positioning, which is interesting for all the companies that we cover, but also from a client perspective. If the society and the clients are demanding, it's important to the companies to adapt and position themselves. And also cost reduction. Several projects are in the end of the project representing a cost reduction in terms of energy or in terms of monetization of the carbon credit generated by the companies. In terms of public sector, and this is another important subject that I want to mention here, we are working on several state governments to help them to modernize energy efficiency, and not only to finance projects in that regards, but also help them and providing them consulting in terms of project finance, funding, tenure, return, and so on. Forest conservation for those ones that are nearby or inside the Amazon region, we are in close relationship with, and how can generate carbon credits throughout REDD projects, and how can we help with that? And also biomethane landfills. So there are several ways that we can work alongside governments also to make this happen. And coming to an end here, I would like to encourage you all, anyone that has projects or activities in the area, to reach out to Banco do Brasil. We are a very big bank, more than 150,000 employees, and I'm pretty sure that we have a team or a project that might fit your necessities, and we can help and work together. Okay, thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. It's fascinating to see also the breadth of activities that you're involved in, and also the fact that you're also taking this sort of advisory role, because I guess there's quite a lot of people that might have the raw asset, if you will, that don't really understand how to maximize that and need a little bit of guidance, as much as they need capital to support that. We're going to have 10-15 minutes for a Q&A. I did want to kick off to both of you, with a question that is at the same an angle as general, but another one is quite specific. I'm really interested to understand how you see the opportunities and challenges in the sort of short to medium term, next, say, 3 years. But one thing that really struck me is that this whole system is predicated on the quality of the underlying asset, and that quality to make it a fungible commodity needs to be normalized. There need to be standards, and there need to be independent bodies that can provide assurance on the quality of that underlying asset. So if you could, to both of you, comment a little bit on that, that would be great. Why don't we start with Alexandre?
Yes. Let me kick off a little bit about the challenges and opportunities, right? We do see the market migrating towards high quality projects, okay, Daniella? And one of the things that motivated Banco do Brasil to step in a more consulting/advisory role is the necessity of high quality projects, more than a project execution. I guess the execution is key, not only about the way you execute, but the timing, the timeline, the amount of money that is going to be needed. And I do think the greatest opportunity in this market is to achieve high quality projects in a specific time frame. The time frame cannot be too long, but the capital will be there. Even in conversations with our asset management team, insurance team, they have dedicated teams and dedicated capital with specific mandates to invest. And the lack of projects is something that's really striking investors. It's not much about lack of returns, but lack of projects that they can be assured in a peaceful way. They can sleep at night knowing that they deploy capital, not only thinking about return, but thinking about this is a good project with high quality, and this is going to develop in a good way for the company and the fund that is investing. So I guess those two main factors is the ones that I consider the opportunities for the near term.
Yeah, I totally agree. I guess we sort of look at it is you don't want it to be too fungible. So carbon dioxide equivalent emission claims are fungible today. So they're worth 1 ton each. So when you look at a high quality project, what you're really trying to do is distinguish between pricing of 1 ton of carbon dioxide equivalent that's been removed or avoided. So if you make it all fungible, so everything's exactly the same, which is what the sort of equity market will try and do. So if you're trying to securitize something or push it down that route, they all want it to be the same. So 1 ton's worth 1 ton. That then takes away some of the differentiation of why one project is better than another and why there's a price point. So if you buy Shell shares, they're all the same, right? Your differential there is whether you buy BP or Shell. What you're trying to do here is figure out, do you buy Kieran's project versus somebody else's project, and why is there a difference? So it's either going to be some form of high quality band to it, whether the bank's been involved and therefore you know there's a level of due diligence that's been done, whether the verifier has got skin in the game. So what they're doing is they're doing their job properly and they'll take a financial balance sheet aside to that. We want to make sure that the asset is owned clearly and therefore it's transacted. I don't make a decision on price, but I will help buyers understand where that CO2 has come from and where it's gone to and why there's a difference. So I want carbon to be fungible from a purchasing point of view, but I want it to be non-fungible from a pricing point of view. And that becomes, it's quite hard. And that means a lot of players in this market are going to have to step up. So part of the reason why the market is where it is on the voluntary side is because you're not really sure what you're buying. And so as a buyer, what are you looking for? Because most buyers is probably not fair. Some buyers are in big companies and they're looking after our ESG, and there's 50 things that they have to do, and carbon is one of them. They are putting a very small amount of their time into that because they've got such a big thing to do. So they're spending a lot of money on scope emissions, scope 1, 2, 3, working out how do they decarbonize. And then the decision to buy a credit is they're buying it because it's got somebody's sticker on it. And that's pretty much what they guarantee. That's not great. And that's why I think partly why the market is sticky. So Kieran may talk as a pure project developer, how long due diligence takes of a firm looking at buying his credits. And I don't know, 6 months, 12 months? Yeah, right? 18 months, right? So if anybody's got to spend that amount of time to decide whether to buy one credit over another, it's not going to work, is it? You're going to try and buy something out of the compliance market, or you're going to try and buy something out of the UNFCCC market because you know what you're buying. So the voluntary market has got to get a point where you trust the data, you trust the people involved in it. And it's not that the project developers aren't trustworthy, it's the fact that there's too many parts and there just needs one bad actor to sort of screw the whole market up.
Very interesting. I guess it also draws in the level of, brings in issues of accountability and trust and the degree of oversight.
It does.
From regulatory agencies.
And the bank doesn't get involved unless the bank's put its own capital at risk. So they're not making decisions because it's lovely. They're making decisions because it's a financial decision. They have to make money out of it, and they're doing good at the same time. Brilliant, right? Everyone has to look at this market in exactly the same way. But if this was a normal custody deal, it's 1 basis point of somebody's assets. You try and ask somebody what they charge for a carbon credit as a broker, 5%, 20%, right? How can it be such a big number? It's got to get down to the sort of, and then all that money's been taken away from the project and the people. So it's got to get to a more normalized financial market, and that means accountability and responsibility.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Wow. Questions? I have Alex over there, and then we have another question just after Alex.
Hi, question for Anthony. First of all, congratulations. I mean, it's amazing what you guys are putting together. Question is, do you normally, I mean, first, are you already live? Are you already doing that things?
Yeah.
Are you operating globally or only the US?
Globally.
And you mentioned that you don't participate in the pricing, but do you connect sellers and buyers, and how you make your money?
Good question. So, yes, we went live September last year. Kieran and I started talking, because you were the first project we really started talking to, say 4 years ago. Yeah. 3 years of that was hard work with the regulators, because what we've done is different. We've taken the property right and embedded it into something, and that took the regulators a bit of time to get their head around because it hadn't been done before. So that probably took 2.5 years of regulatory work. We went live in September. We've got 20 project developers now on platform doing transactions, and we're generally doing a transaction a week. And what you should do in the future is you should never hear from me, because I'm just a settlement engine, if you want to look at it that way. I am like the most boring bit of infrastructure within this market. These guys do the fun stuff, right? They invest, they put their capital at risk, they make sure that projects are done. If you hear from me, and it's because I've screwed up, right? So you should never hear from me, right? You should have an asset on my platform. It gets executed for cash. You receive your money, your credits move, everybody's happy. You should never hear from me. So if I'm that infrastructure play, and I clear 20% of sterling every day, right? Not me personally, but our business. You never hear from us because we don't make mistakes. We manage trillions of dollars a day of transactions. So carbon credit transaction is a fraction of what we do every day. So that's what we do. And what we make sure is that above that, and originally this is awful, but my first thought was it was like Tinder for carbon. And my boss says you can't say that. And I was like, okay, I've never been on Tinder. But apparently, match.com. So you've got a buyer and a seller, and you want them to fall in love, and you want them to do transactions for the next 30 years, ever decreasing, because all of those companies that are buying credits should only be buying them because they're going through that decarbonisation pathway. What project developers want is guaranteed flow for the next 15 years, because that's their cash flows. Then they can reinvest that. They can guarantee that that money's coming in. So my original naive thought is that buyers and sellers would fall in love. They'd then do these long-term offtake agreements, money would flow, and then project developers can take risks and put more projects in place and do more things. It's been harder than that, than I thought it would be. But we're now, we transacted 1.4 million tons last week to an insurance fund. So we're starting to see some of those long-term deals come through, because you are buying an asset and you can treat that as a financial asset on platform, which means you can use it as balance sheet. So you can put it on balance sheet. There's assets you can do with it. You can lend it. We've got 2 deals already in place where they've been used as collateral in other deals. Haircuts are horrendous, but they're in place. So we're starting to see people buying the asset. Or actually, if Kieran doesn't think the price is right, he could put all of his current credits in a collateralized account, borrow money against it, and start investing that cash, because he's got an asset that he can now physically hand over to somebody. So we're starting to see the market move. But the bit that I've been really struggling with is that sort of buyers and sellers meeting. The current market is quite opaque. and you don't really want buyers and sellers to meet in the current market. You want a broker in the middle who does his magic and gets paid. I never really liked that model, but the peer-to-peer thing hasn't yet, I'm going to say, come to fruition. Yeah, and we only charge one fee, so we don't charge anything for use of the platform or the bank accounts. When credits are sold, we take a small fee, right? And that's it. So everything else is all part of the process.
You take the fee from the buyer or from the seller or from both?
From the project developer only. Seller pays nothing at all.
No, the project developer is the seller.
Sorry, buyer pays nothing at all.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, PD pays a small fee on transact. When the cash has hit their account, they pay a small fee.
Thank you very much. We have a question there, and then we have.
Hi, thank you both very much. It was really interesting. I have a question for Tiago. As a funder, investor looking at projects, how important is it to you to see other sources of revenue for companies? Is it okay for companies to be pure play carbon, or do you see an attractiveness in businesses that are looking at alternative systems of revenue alongside that?
Mm-hmm. Well, for us, we are agnostic to this type of, if your only activity comes from that, or if you have other, but I will tell you in the day-to-day practice, I do think 95 to 97% of the time, it will be just an additional revenue from an already existing business that does the other stuff. But every time I approach those type of subjects, I tend to do not look at the current situation, but going forward. So I'd say to you, if you ask me that question in 3 years from now, it will be 10%, with it to me a growth of 3 times of the existing part. So I would say we would not close our eyes and our doors to core business being that, but the current situation, it's very small percentage.
Nice question. Yeah, one last question.
Thank you very much. Rodrigo from Howden, from the Carbon team. I have 2 questions regarding supply and the conditions in Brazil. The first one is about if you can update us about what's the situation with the lawsuit filed by Sinesec to the Supreme Court challenging the demand of the use of non-use reserve for insurance companies to buy carbon credits, which if the case, it will create an amazing amount of supply and it will create liquidity in the market. That's something that we're looking with really interest from far, but we would like to know if you can share some information about that. And the second one is the status of the government on implementing the rules of the Article 6 implementation for CORSIA. Again, same situation where we see an uptake on demand, and we're having these international airplane players trying to get the role that Brazil can feeding into the system, these high quality credits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to give you a brief because I'm not being that much on the last decision from STF, but I would say to you that all the conversations that we have with our teams in Brazil, they are all based on a little bit of lack of clear regulation to 2026. Everybody knows what's going to be in place in 2026, but the small details, which is very important for those projects, are still a little bit unknown. What I can say from the bank now, we are working with teams and specialized lawyers to understand what's going to be the most probably outcome from that, but I cannot give you a little bit of specifics because I'm not deep on that.
You asked about CORSIA. We heard some fairly worrying things last week coming out of the US around CORSIA, and the fact that the big US carriers are now backing away. Certainly not going to move as forward with CORSIA as quickly as we thought. And then the outcome of that was a lot of the other carriers that fly into the US are saying that maybe they'll back away. So there's a bit of certainly CORSIA is not going to hit quite as early as we thought, 26. It's probably going to be 27, but there's some noises at the moment that's becoming more complicated. I think the demand coming from CORSIA credits may just be pushed out 12 months whilst people deal with the economic and the political turmoil that coming out of the States.
Thank you very much, Anthony and Tiago. I think it's been a really fascinating presentation and discussion. Thank you for the questions, everyone. And I think we're going to have a break in a minute, and then we resume for the next stage of the event. Thank you very much. Thank you.